what makes the best level? This is a question that every game developer has to ask themselves when making their own game. But if you've ever wondered this yourself, you might have realized that the answer is not as cut and dry as it may seem. For instance, you could build the best Super Meat Boy level ever created, but if you were to slap Mario into it, you wouldn't have a great time. This is because the best video game level isn't completely universal. Crafting the perfect level depends on how you incorporate your own game mechanics into it. In order to figure out how to create levels in this vein, we are going to take a look at a game that does this almost perfectly. I'm Kash Preble with Ghosty Games, and today, let's take a look at how Donkey Kong makes its perfect levels. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is absolutely bananas. It is full of insane and unexpected mechanics that make every level different and unique. But what's really crazy is how this game takes the standard level design principles we know and laughs in the face of their simplicity. Video games like Kirby and New Super Mario Bros. Tend to follow the same design template of about 5 steps when it comes to their levels. I like to call these steps the level laws. The level laws are as follows. Number 1, introduce. This is the part of the process that refers to displaying the main gimmick of your level. This is usually done in a way that doesn't harm the player, so as to let them learn before they are thrown into the deep end. Number 2, develop. This is where you allow the gimmick to naturally evolve into a basic challenge. If you were dealing with floating platforms, this might be done by making you jump between 2 of them over some type of hazard. Number 3, expand. Expanding is simply making the established challenge harder. Instead of jumping between 2 big platforms, how about jumping between a bunch of smaller ones? Number 4, twist. Take your challenge and add something new and exciting to the mix. This could be a different type of platform that is much bouncier, or maybe just a new enemy that you haven't faced before. And lastly, number 5, the finale. Mix up any of the gimmicks that you have introduced and create a final challenge for the player to overcome. This finale should have some reward at the end, whether that's an extra life or just the end of the level. If you would like to know more about the rules of level design, make sure to stay tuned for our video that talks specifically about them. But for now, let's see why Donkey Kong is so different in this aspect. These level laws are usually able to create enjoyable and at the very least, consistent levels throughout your game. But Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze takes these basic laws and pushes them past their breaking points. But how did Donkey Kong pull this off? I mean, how were they able to pack so much stuff into each level without making the game feel bloated or too busy? What's important to remember about Donkey Kong is that although the game is wildly more advanced than a normal platformer, it doesn't completely do away with the rules already set in place. Each level still has gimmicks that are developed, expanded on, twisted, and finalized. But what's incredible about these levels is that they can sometimes have 3, 4, even 5 mechanics in a single level, all without making it feel like the mechanics were not properly explored. So if that's the case, then this game must have a different pattern, right? Actually, the answer is yes. Well, kind of. You see, the basic structure is almost completely the same, but there are a few key differences to note. In Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, we are still given an introduction to the gimmick of the level. And for the most part, this intro is usually completely safe. We can see this in a level like Canopy Chaos right off the bat, where there is no way to die on this first vine. But interestingly, Donkey Kong tends to skip right past the development of the danger. Basically, the game assumes the player should be able to understand how the mechanic could be dangerous, and wastes no time trying to explain it. This means directly after the intro, we expand on the danger that you should intuitively know. And in some levels, the development is moved to a secret area. More on those later. So, after the intro, we are instead thrown into the expansion, which is jumping between 2 swinging vines. Afterwards, we are on to the twist. In this level, it happens to be these moving platforms. And with that, it's on to the finale. In this case, it's a vertical climbing challenge that puts your platforming to the test. And at the end, you have your reward, which is a satisfying barrel blast filled with many bananas. At this point, you might be thinking, wait a minute, that was a very short level. And you would be correct, if that were the end of the level. You see, in this game, the reward doesn't always lead to the end of the level. In fact, most of the time, you go right back to the beginning of the cycle. Right after these barrels are done, we are introduced to another main gimmick, a suspiciously twitching set of spikes. And just as before, we skip past the developing and expand on the danger that you have already concocted in your head. The expansion is as simple as you dodging an enemy while making sure your jump doesn't fall too short. Now, this is where it gets a little more interesting. I'm going to call this next step the mini twist. We are shown a small section with the twist of the twitching spikes gimmick. In this case, it's the fact that they are spinning. But we also bring back the mechanic from the beginning of the game, the vines. Then we go to the actual twist and we focus on those spinning spikes introduced previously. And once again, we reach the finale, which is a test of both gimmicks completely combined. And this isn't just on one level either. Each level uses the level laws as a repeating cycle until every gimmick is completely fleshed out. In Windmill Hill, we are introduced. The danger expands, the twist comes in, and the finale hits. And right after your reward, we go back to being introduced. The danger expands, the mini twist is shown, the full twist is shown, and we end with a big finale. So in conclusion, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze repeats the 5 level laws until each mechanic is properly introduced. On each repetition, there may be a mini twist thrown in to remind you of what mechanics are about to mix. And each finale after the first includes everything you've learned from previous cycles. Whoa, that's a lot to take in. But it is this process that makes Donkey Kong so special compared to other platformers. Donkey Kong doesn't show you 5 mechanics all at once and expect you to understand. It actually goes through the process of a basic level over and over until the player gradually understands how everything works. Now, of course, this is going to have some effects on the pacing of the level. If Mario introduced this many mechanics in its own style, the level would feel like it was lasting years. Donkey Kong trims the fat and puts everything closer together, making the game feel incredibly exciting even when you're taking a break from the action. Speaking of taking a break from the action, let's talk about all the extra challenges this game gives the player. In each level, there are plenty of gold puzzle pieces which reward the player for exploration. These allow you to take a break from the action and have some additional incentive when it comes to completing each level. If you're facing a difficult section of a level, you can take a second and find a puzzle piece or two. And let's not forget about the mini-games. Donkey Kong is filled with little challenges that are usually a completely different feel from the level you're on, which can break up some of the longer sections. And lastly, we have the Kong letters. These letters aren't as much for exploration as they are for platforming challenges. In order to get some of these, you need to understand how Diddy's jetpack works, how to fly with Dixie, or even how to use Cranky's cane to your advantage. And to get others, you need to know how to carry your momentum, or use your roll's super cool coyote jump ability. Overall, these challenges give you much more to do than just beat a few levels, and they are a very welcome addition in this game. The last part of this game's design that we need to cover is its ability to design levels by the story it creates. For example, World 5 follows the process of harvesting fruit in Harvest Hazards, extracting the juice in Fruity Factory, turning the juice into Jell-O in Jelly Jamboree, and finally, freezing the Jell-O into popsicles in Frosty Fruits. This level of attention to detail cannot be understated in any way. Even the first level of the game shows how the penguins are sailing in and docking on the island you're on. The level Scorch and Torch displays the savannah that you've been exploring burning down. And the best part? All of these levels use the stories to come up with interesting mechanics. Platforming on giant popsicles and bouncing on literal Jell-O would never have been implemented like this without the developers allowing the story to influence their design. Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze is insane when it comes to the amount of thought that went into its level design. There are very few other platformers out there with this amount of polish, attention to detail, and overall love put into it. The progression of each level feels like it was perfected over lifetimes, and every addition to the series felt right at home. Seeing Donkey and Diddy Kong is always a sign that what you're about to play has had a ton of care put into it, and the revival of Dixie was long overdue. And let's not forget about Cranky Kong. Although not as cool as Dixie, he was a perfect fourth companion to this adventure. Wait, Diddy has drums and Donkey Kong has this weird horn thing? You're telling me I bought both Donkey Konga games and Jungle Beat for you to retcon Donkey Kong's drumming abilities? 0 out of 10 game. Okay. In all seriousness, I will say that to a casual gamer, this game does have some super tough spots and can be a bit frustrating. Just because the game allows you to understand each mechanic doesn't mean that its learning curve is perfect for a beginner. With that being said, if this game was too hard for you when it first came out, you definitely should give it another shot, and to anyone who hasn't played this game before, whether it just slipped by due to being on the walking corpse, or you were butthurt about Metroid, then this title is an absolute must-play and you should definitely pick it up.